Well, they built war rooms with your name etched on whiteboards, scribbled in red ink like a curse they couldn't pronounce. Surveillance? Please. They bought satellites, tapped networks, interrogated ghosts from your past, dug up emails that never existed, paid traders in crypto, and gave cowards a voice in return for silence. $1 million just to peel back the layers of a soul they never understood. They thought truth lived in files, in leaks, in stolen data. Fools. The real truth was carved into your scars, encrypted in pain, and whispered by demons that danced only for you. And now those demons are screaming in their ears, every night. They said they wanted to know who you really are. So you let them. Not with explanations, not with words, with storms, with silence that made their hearts collapse under the pressure of your presence, with the look in your eyes that turned boardrooms into funeral parlors. You didn't hide your truth. They just never had the strength to handle it. So when they unboxed your past, they didn't find dirt. They found depth. When they played your voice on loops, trying to dissect tone, what they heard was prophecy. And when they stared into the abyss of your psychology, it stared right back and started laughing in their own voice. They weren't just trying to expose you. They were trying to own you. Puppet strings made of gossip, manipulation dressed as concern, traps designed to provoke reactions you'd already evolved past. They wanted to clip your wings, label you volatile, unstable, broken. But you turned labels into tattoos, wore them like war paint. You didn't just escape their grip, you shattered the very hands that reached for you. They launched smear campaigns. You launched revolutions. They wrote essays. You wrote legacies. And every time they tried to bury you deeper, you took root and came back venomous. They tried to weaponize your past, forgetting that your past is your arsenal. They paraded your pain like a trophy, hoping the world would recoil. But the world didn't flinch. It listened. It watched. And it began to understand that you weren't the villain of your story. You were the aftermath. The final chapter they didn't have the ink to write. Every shadow they tried to expose only made your light sharper, more blinding. And now, those shadows live with them, sleep beside them, whisper in their ears. Because you didn't just survive the fire, you became it. They bought information. You built intuition. They read your messages. You decoded their souls. They had spreadsheets. You had strategies. They thought unveiling your secrets would unmake you, but all they did was reveal their own cowardice, broadcasted it under the disguise of curiosity. Because what they feared most wasn't what they'd find. It was the you who would rise after they looked. And you did rise, unapologetic, unfiltered, unkillable. You didn't retaliate with lawsuits or scandals. You retaliated with presence. You walked into rooms they tried to lock you out of, and you didn't knock, you took over. You didn't argue with their slander. You let it echo in empty chambers, while you built empires on the outskirts of their noise. You didn't explain yourself to the liars. They weren't worthy of your truth. You simply evolved in ways they never predicted. And that's when they began to panic. Because the more they uncovered, the less they understood. You weren't hiding skeletons. You were dancing with them. You weren't running from shame. You weaponized it. They expected a breakdown. Instead, they got a blueprint for domination. And now, the same hands that signed off $1 million witch hunt are trembling. unsure whether to offer you peace or pray for distance. But it's too late for both. You've seen what they're willing to do in the name of exposure. And now, you're willing to show them what you can do in the name of reckoning. They thought you were naive, thought you didn't know the cameras were rolling, thought you didn't see the microphones planted, the double agents smiling with poisoned words. But you did. You let it happen. You baited them with fragments, misled them with half-truths, and while they scrambled for answers, you rewrote the questions. You weren't just 10 steps ahead, you were on a different board, and every pawn they moved was already accounted for in your chaos theory. Because this wasn't about damage control. This was about design. See, while they spent fortunes to dissect your past, you invested silence into your future. You let them drown in obsession while you walked through fire, unbothered. They thought their intel would be your end. Instead, it became your intro, the moment the world turned to watch what they'd exposed. It witnessed something else, something terrifying, something beautiful. The rise of a mind sculpted by betrayal and precision. And you didn't just rise quietly, you erupted. Now their hands are blistered from the truth they tried to hold. Now their networks are haunted by the very data they collected. Because every piece of your past they unearthed became a mirror, and they saw themselves in it. And they didn't like what stared back. Because this wasn't about you being guilty. This was about them needing you to be guilty, to justify their own decay. But when the smoke cleared, all they had were burnt files and broken egos. And now, they're begging you to stop. But not because you're violent, not because you're ruthless. They're begging because you're brilliant. Because their entire machine, their entire operation, collapsed under the weight of your poise. You didn't scream, you didn't threaten. You simply exposed the fact that they never had power. They just had platforms, and platforms crumble when the truth echoes louder than the lies they're built on. You weren't supposed to survive their spotlight. You were supposed to melt under scrutiny, but instead, you turned their light into a lens and made the whole world look deeper. And what they saw wasn't a criminal, wasn't a monster, wasn't a freak. They saw the system they'd learned to fear, the anomaly, the glitch, the one who walked through hell with receipts and came back selling fire. They can't delete you, can't suppress you, can't decode you, because you're not a file, you're a force. So now, they gather in boardrooms not to plan your downfall, but to negotiate your silence. They offer apologies dipped in arrogance, proposals wrapped in threats, but nothing works. Because they made one fatal mistake. They gave you the spotlight and forgot you were born in darkness. Not the cinematic kind, not the romanticized struggle wrapped in violin music. No, the kind of darkness that breathes, that memorizes betrayal, that sharpens every breath into a blade. The kind that teaches you how to walk without making a sound, until your silence becomes the loudest scream they've ever heard. That's what they unleashed. Not just a person, but a phenomenon engineered in shadow, tempered in patience, and now unleashed without mercy. They assumed exposure would fracture you, that revelation would reduce you. But they failed to grasp one thing. Secrets only hurt when they're shameful. And you turned shame into sculpture, into architecture, into a throne they can't look at without remembering what they tried to destroy. The irony? They wanted the world to judge you, but instead, the world started judging them. Their motives, their methods, their sudden obsession with tearing apart someone they once pretended didn't exist. See, the real story isn't about what they uncovered. It's about why they needed to uncover it in the first place. You became an obsession not because of guilt, but because of unpredictability. You were untamed, uncontrolled, unapologetic. And in their world, anyone who doesn't bow is branded dangerous. So they thought, let's make an example out of you. But what they didn't calculate was that you weren't an example. You were the exception, and exceptions rewrite the rules. Their plan didn't just backfire, it detonated in their hands. Every dossier they compiled became a monument to their desperation. Every whisper they tried to circulate became a trumpet call that backfired. They used money as a weapon. You used your history as a war cry. And now, they're standing knee-deep in the ashes of their own strategy, trying to convince the world they were only trying to protect it. But no one buys that lie anymore. The curtain's been pulled. The stage is empty, and all eyes are on the only character who never flinched when the truth walked in. And while they fumble with statements, with PR shields, with carefully worded press releases, you walk unarmored through the wreckage. They tried to make you the headline, and you became the author. You didn't just take back the narrative, you obliterated theirs. Not with drama, with clarity, with presence so raw and unedited, it stripped their illusions bare. You didn't come for sympathy. You came for equilibrium. And now, the balance has shifted. There's panic in their cadence now. The confidence is fractured. Behind their doors, they whisper your name like it's an incantation, not out of reverence, out of fear, because they know you're no longer reactive. You're strategic. You're not shouting anymore. You're observing. Not because you're done, but because you're planning. And nothing frightens manipulators more than the silence of someone they can no longer predict. They underestimated your resilience, mistook stillness for submission. They didn't realize that while they were busy unraveling your timeline, you were mapping out their psychology, watching their moves, clocking their tactics, calculating. You've seen their tells. You've read the panic behind the smirks. You know exactly where they're weakest, because while they were obsessed with your past, you became a master of their present. They still don't understand what they triggered. This isn't vengeance. It's revelation. You're not returning fire. You're pulling the curtain back on a system that's rotted from the inside out. And they're terrified, because this time, there's no enemy to frame. No easy scapegoat. Just the cold, surgical exposure of who they truly are. The manipulation, the coercion, the manufactured narratives, and worst of all, the fear that none of it worked. And now, they retreat into technicalities. Try to negotiate with smoke. Offer you windows they previously sealed shut. They talk of peace, like they didn't already burn the treaty. They offer you sanitized versions of reality, hoping you'll play along. But you don't play anymore. You design, you disrupt, you dismantle. You don't want revenge, you want justice, and not the courtroom kind. The kind that leaves reputations in ruins and the truth etched into memory. They wonder why you haven't retaliated the way they expected. Why you haven't launched your own attacks. It's because they still think in terms of power, but you think in terms of impact. You don't want them destroyed. You want them remembered. remembered not as architects of your downfall, but as footnotes in your awakening. You don't want to break their systems. You want to expose them so fully that they collapse under the weight of their own rot. That's a punishment far more permanent. And the world, it's watching. Not the curated world they manufactured, but the real one. The people behind the screens. The ones who've been torn apart in silence. Who recognize in you something terrifyingly familiar. Their reflection, their rage, their rise. You've become more than a threat. You've become a blueprint. A reminder that endurance doesn't mean compliance. That surviving doesn't mean forgetting. That rising doesn't mean forgiving. Their fear now isn't that you'll retaliate. It's that you'll inspire. That others will stop apologizing for surviving. That silence will stop being currency. That the shadows they used as leverage will become the crucibles of new leaders. They fear contagion. And you're the virus they can't quarantine. You didn't just break their model, you infected it with possibility, with rebellion, with purpose. So they keep sending messengers, with olive branches sharpened like knives, with smiles that don't reach their eyes. But you're not hungry for truce. You're not interested in compromise dressed as surrender. You're building something else now, not a response, a legacy. And it won't be defined by the battles they tried to drag you into, but by the empire you construct on the bones of their blueprints. They want the storm to settle. You want it to be remembered. Because everything they tried to extract from you, every secret they bought, every scar they spotlighted, it all became the anthem of your ascent. They spent fortunes trying to undo you, and all they did was crown you. And now, as the world shifts, and the sky folds into the weight of your presence, one truth becomes clearer than ever. You never needed to be protected from the truth. They did, because they weren't building a case against you. They were building armor against what you represent. You were never just a person to them. You were a warning, a reminder that their lies had an expiration date, that their thrones weren't bolted to the ground. They saw you as a glitch, but you were the prophecy. And now that it's come true, they're scrambling to rewrite the ending, as if ink doesn't bleed once truth has touched the page. They underestimated the velocity of your silence, the way your mere existence disrupted blueprints generations in the making. Their institutions weren't designed to survive exposure, and you were pure light cloaked in grit. So when you emerged, unapologetic, unafraid, they didn't just panic, they fractured. Because if one like you could rise, others might follow. And for them, that wasn't just inconvenient, that was cataclysmic. Now they parade their guilt behind glass smiles. Call it a misunderstanding, a misstep. They test the waters with performative remorse, as if history hasn't already carved your memory into the bones of everyone watching. But there is no forgetting, no fast-forward button for the damage done. Their empire of control has cracks now, big enough to let in screams. And you became the sound they couldn't unhear, the echo that refuses to fade, the pulse in the walls of their empire, reminding them collapse begins from within. They tried to monitor you, manage you, mold you into something easier to destroy. But your shape was never meant for containment. You don't fit in headlines. You don't dilute in gossip. You don't apologize just to make others comfortable. You emerged not as an answer, but as a mirror. And mirrors don't lie, they reflect. brutally, relentlessly. And when you turned that mirror toward them, they saw what they'd become. Not leaders, not protectors, but predators in tailored suits, panicking behind polished rhetoric. And now they want peace, not because they believe in it, but because you've made war too expensive. Because every time they swing, they lose more than they gain. Every whisper turns into a wave. Every smear attempts to stick, but ends up sliding down the walls of your defiance. They can't contain the momentum anymore, so they try to redirect it. Offer you platforms dipped in poison, microphones laced with expectation. But you speak in your own tongue now, a language they can't mimic, can't mute, can't monetize. Because this was never about revenge, it was about restoration. Not just of your image, but of the power they tried to strip from your very name. You didn't ask for a seat at their table. You flipped the blueprint and built your own arena, where truth is currency, where scars aren't hidden, they're engraved into the walls like victory banners. And now, they're left pounding on the gates of a kingdom they can't enter, one forged from every attempt they made to erase you. You see, there's a different kind of justice taking root now, one that doesn't wear robes or sit behind gavels. It walks the streets. It breathes through your presence. It pulses in every heart that learned from your survival. They tried to erase a person. They accidentally ignited a movement. And movements don't die when the headlines fade. They evolve. They multiply. They haunt. And you've become more than proof. You've become precedent. The living contradiction to every story they tried to sell about who wins, who breaks, who stays silent. You didn't just refuse to break. You redefined what breaking even looks like. Turned it into rebirth, into blueprint, into dominion. Now they stumble through interviews, fumbling for the right version of the past. They keep trying to explain away the unexplainable. How someone with every odd stacked against them walked through the storm and never asked for shelter. They don't get it. They never will. Because they think power is inherited, bestowed. But you showed them what real power looks like, earned, breath by breath, scar by scar, decision by unforgivable decision. And still, they don't understand why you won't move on. As if closure is something you can buy. As if silence is the prize they're entitled to now that you've risen. But you've never wanted quiet. You wanted clarity. And you've carved it into every room you enter now. They used to own the silence. Now it shivers at your feet. Your presence is a storm they can't outlast, a memory they can't dilute. You're not a trend. You're a timestamp. You mark the moment the old system bled out, and something raw, unfiltered, and uncontrollable took its place. You are not the exception. You are the evidence that the broken can build, that the cornered can conquer, that the exposed can evolve into something they'll never be able to file away again. And so they watch, hollow-eyed, pretending nothing's changed while everything around them burns differently now. The air isn't the same. It carries your name, the one they tried to tarnish, the one they spent 7 digits dragging through dirt. But they forgot. Diamonds are just carbon under pressure. And you're not carbon anymore. You're something rarer, something they can't catalog, can't classify, can't bury. They thought unveiling your past would erase your future. But it did the opposite. It carved a throne from the very ruins they hoped would consume you. Now they stumble through shadows you've already mapped, while you ascend, unshaken, unrepentant, unmatched, and maybe just maybe, they finally realized the cost of poking a sleeping giant. You weren't hiding, you were hibernating. And now that you've awakened, they see the truth in full glare. You weren't the threat, you were the warning. The line in the sand they never thought you'd cross. And now you don't just walk across it, you own it. You rule the silence they weaponized. You echo in the boardrooms they once felt safe in. You breathe in spaces they tried to suffocate. You turned every attempt at your erasure into a sermon of resurrection.